Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the revolution. Okay, maybe not really a revolution. I would call the advent of crypto a revolution, but that was over a decade ago now. And the original vision of crypto has been contorted and twisted to perverse extremes. While we might not be due for another revolution yet, I'd say we are due for a hard reset. Crypto started with the launch of a public, open, and permissionless decentralized protocol, and the founder used it right alongside the public. Now, over a decade later, too many projects are just rebuilding Wall Street on the blockchain, complete with ponzinomics, VC money, and featuring you as the team and investors exit liquidity. This is unsustainable. It's time for Cardano to be the one that hits that reset button. Ready? Let's go. Today, we're going to discuss the path forward with a hard crypto reset, a few congressmen fighting against a US CBDC, the stance of Congress on real crypto in a post-FTX world, Kraken with mass layoffs, the European Central Bank competing to be the world's worst fortune teller, and maybe something almost free if you've still got your Cardano Summit 2021 NFTs. If you completely could not tell that this is a reset counter that just came up as Cardano, or if you're finding value in these videos each weekday, please consider delegating to the army of spies stake pool, ticker AOS. I've spent the last few days asking myself how we got here. How did we stray so far from the path? How did ponzinomics become the norm in crypto? Unfortunately, I've reached the following conclusion. Ponzinomics comes to us wearing the robes of decentralization. And it only comes to us because the builders, that's with like 3 or 4 O's, the builders weren't allowed to just take a cut of the transactions. Don't get me wrong, I'm a capitalist. I believe we should allow Adam Smith's hidden hand to guide the allocation of capital and help organize the markets. I think that's the only way it really works. We've seen a lot of other alternate systems, and we've also seen them fail miserably. I think capitalism is definitely the way to go. But I think something's gone wrong here. And I think it's illustrated by this contrast. At the advent of crypto, Satoshi launched a product, a network, some software, a decentralized system. When he launched that network, there was no pre-mine. Satoshi didn't say, oh, by the way, here's my team allocation to myself. I keep 20% of all the Bitcoin. That's not what happened. There was no pre-mine. He also didn't have a website that you log into to do all of your Bitcoin transactions. He had a distributed front end where you download the software to your local system. Satoshi also didn't do anything that required you to give up custody. And most importantly, because there was no pre-mine, the way Satoshi benefited from their invention was by actually using the platform alongside the public. You can see that in a table in this article pointed out by Christoph. This is a table of hash rate in the Bitcoin network. You can see that Satoshi's hash rate is in red, the total network hash rate is in blue, and you can see almost immediately other people were in there mining along with Satoshi, and Satoshi only made up most of the hash rate on the Bitcoin network from something like launch in January 2009 until, maybe 10 months later in October 2009. And then the rest of the network kind of took off, and Satoshi no longer made up most of the hash rate in the network. For all but the very earliest periods of Satoshi's mining, maybe this period right over here, he was basically mining alongside the public. But that was enough for him to create a fortune in Bitcoin that we now measure in billions of US dollars. You want to talk about a fair launch? This is a real fair launch. But that's not how it works today. Today, we get teams saying, "Good job, Satoshi. How altruistic of you. But unlike you, we couldn't build our protocol for free. Our protocol was expensive and everybody's got to get paid. So instead of what you did, we're just going to create centralized front ends and protocols that look like labyrinths to lock user coins in so we can exit our team and investor token positions before the ponzinomics fell." This whole thing down here, guys, this doesn't work. This is unsustainable. This is not going to exist long term. This is going to get regulated into dust. No midnight pun intended. I'm not trying to be cold hearted toward the teams here. I completely understand why they're doing what they're doing. In the traditional world, they would just build out their protocol and their corporate entity that owns the protocol would just take a sliver of every single transaction. This is the traditional model that's existed in tech forever, or you monetize the user and feed them ads, sell them to the ad companies. Also very unhealthy. But I think in the traditional world, we all know how this would work. Obviously, that's not going to fly because of our decentralization ethos in crypto and especially in Cardano. And also, all of the use cases they're attacking are like semi-illegal. So if they don't have the decentralization, they're worried the regulators are going to hammer them. I completely understand that. We also had another model before this one. This isn't the first model we used to kind of evade regulators, or so we thought. Back in 2017, we had an ICO craze where projects, no matter what they were doing, just had initial coin offerings. This was kicked off by the Ethereum initial coin offering, and then people used Ethereum to do their own initial coin offerings. But after the 2017 ICO craze, everybody realized the SEC wasn't going to go for that either. So they can't go with the traditional model where they just own the platform and they take a sliver of every transaction. That doesn't seem to work, mainly because the regulators would go after them. And they can't do ICOs anymore because the regulators would go after them. And they can't just sell off the coins and tell people the coins represent an equity interest in the project. That's kind of the ICO thing. So what are they left with? They're left with this whole ponzinomics thing where they issue some kind of token. We talked about this yesterday, often a governance token, and it's like tenuously connected to the value of the project or the utility of the project, but it's all kind of based on ponzinomics, and eventually it fails, and the founders and the team and the investors, they all know that it's eventually going to fail. So they have to create these protocols. They lock up all the user coins and they can exit their, pre-mint positions, the team and investor allocations before the ponzinomics fail. And I mean, it's kind of hard to detect that because the timelines are kind of extremely variable. Like some of these projects, the ponzinomics fail very quickly. Some of them go on for some time. But because of all the weird exogenous regulatory stuff, right? This isn't a function of the hidden hand, Adam Smith's invisible hand, guiding the correct allocation of capital. This isn't that. This is the exogenous force of regulation stifling innovation. Innovation can't go in the normal direction. The normal way for this to work would be these teams would come along and they would decentralize their project just by selling off, the equivalent of like equity positions in the whole project to the entire community, and they could hang on to a little portion for themselves, of course. That would be the normal way for this to work, and then everybody would make money as the project made money, and the team and the investors wouldn't have to dump on retail and use the users as exit liquidity. That's the way it could work, but we can't do that because of the regulation, because of the lack of clarity in regulation, because some of the regulators are truly out to get us. Obviously, that doesn't work, and this doesn't work. The alternative doesn't work, and what we're doing today absolutely doesn't work. I mean, it works short term, but it's not sustainable. So I'm going to suggest a hard reset, a solution to this that goes down, has two sort of parallel paths. You could choose two sort of forks on this trail. And I don't think I need to convince anyone. I'm not trying to convince anyone because I don't think we're going to have a choice. I think the regulators eventually are going to come along and just crush this. they're going to come along and crush this whole model, this whole ponzinomics thing. This is going to get crushed. There are so many different ways that they can pound this into dust with their regulatory hammers, just using the securities laws. There are so many reasons why this does not conform to the securities laws. So here's what I think. Once this gets crushed, I think we have sort of two paths. I'm sure this is crypto, so people will come up with, very creative and clever people will come up with 1,000 other ways, but I'm going to propose two possible paths once this gets crushed inevitably. So I think the first one is you don't do illegal businesses. You don't do these businesses that are, semi-illegal, that would be illegal if they didn't have the old crypto label on them. You don't do those businesses. And if you want to be running one of these highly profitable enterprises, a business, you just run a business. You do a non-illegal activity and you run it as a business. You say, hey, we are not a decentralized project. We're a business and we're selling you something. I think of something like human readable addresses. We have ADA handles in Cardano. This is a perfect model. This is something that is way more on the legal side than a lot of the DeFi projects we could discuss. They're just offering human readable addresses and a lot of other things. Like I'm not trying to short sell the technology there, but they're offering something that is much more on the side of legality than a lot of the projects we have in DeFi across crypto. And that's something you can just run as a normal business. You can say, hey, we are not a decentralized entity. We are a normal business offering everyone this product that we think is a great product. Here you go. You just run it and then you act like a normal business. You monetize that product just like a normal business would. Nothing wrong with that. I'm a capitalist. I believe such things should exist. Business enterprises should exist. That's one path. The other path is if you're going to do these things, and for purposes of this conversation, we'll say these things where we don't have regulatory clarity. If you're going to do those things, instead of doing this unsustainable thing down here that the regulators are going to act like Thor and fly through the air and crush with their Mjolnir hammer, instead of doing these doomed things down here, just do this. Do what Satoshi did. You're not going to make as much money as quickly. Down here, this is definitely the way to make as much money as possible, as quickly as possible. But I don't think that's going to be available once the regulators do the Thor thing and they crush you with their regulatory hammers. I think you're going to have to do this. If you want to do the things where there's no regulatory clarity, I think you're going to have to do this, which means you can't have a centralized entity. You can't be an available regulatory target. The reason why Satoshi was successful, if Satoshi had been, hey, my name's not Satoshi Nakamoto, it's, John Smith. I live at this address. Here's my corporate entity that is running this project for me. Regulators would have crushed him. We would have no Bitcoin if that had been the case. Instead, what he did is this: no pre-mine, distributed front end, self-custody for users, and he just used the platform alongside the public. It's hard to say where the illegality comes in here if you do it like this. There was no corporation running a website that everybody used to access the protocol. There was no centralized entity holding custody of user assets. There was no pre-mine that Satoshi set aside for, Team Satoshi and accompanying VCs. There was none of that. He just launched a network and he used the network alongside the public. I kind of think this is going to be the only solution left if you were trying to launch a protocol in one of these areas with no regulatory clarity. Just to be clear, I'm absolutely not advising that anyone try to do anything illegal in crypto or otherwise. What I'm saying is that looking at crypto academically, if we say there's a strong possibility that all this down here gets crushed, and we also have a case study historically of this model working out, and we can say academically it's hard to identify a regulatory target under this model. One of the reasons why Bitcoin has been able to exist for over a decade is because there was no regulatory target behind Bitcoin. If you follow this model, no pre-mine, distributed front end, self-custody, founder earns via platform alongside public, we can say academically it's hard to identify a regulatory target here. Under this model, it's like all of these things have been duct taped on to the original vision for crypto just to help the team and early investors to make more money more quickly. But even by duct taping all those things on to sort of avoid regulators and still make, more money more quickly, there are still regulatory targets under this model. Under this model, no regulatory targets. And if you just choose a business that's obviously legal, you could just run that as a business on the blockchain. I think we're all okay with there being businesses. That's it. I think we get the hard reset whether we want it or not. Regulators are going to force that on us. This probably can't exist long term. You can either run a business that's obviously legal, or you can be a Satoshi. I'm about to show you something that involves a polarizing figure, but please know I'm not taking one side or the other. I'm just making you aware of something that I think is an interesting development in crypto policy. Tom Emmer and Ted Cruz are introducing legislation that will prevent the Federal Reserve from ever issuing a CBDC directly to individuals, at least in the mind of Tom Emmer. This is what he believes his legislation will do. I'll leave it up to you guys. I haven't seen the actual bill. I'm not sure if anybody had. No, he says I have introduced it. So it is out there. I just haven't seen it. But I'm not sure what his bill would actually do. I haven't seen the bill, but I think it's an interesting development. There are some in Congress who are fighting the idea of the Federal Reserve introducing a central bank digital currency directly to consumers. Speaking of the US Congress, if you want to read a great, very high level, but still good article about the stance of various congressional factions on crypto in this post-FTX world we're in now, this article from Wired is pretty good. So it's kind of interesting. They have actual quotes from a bunch of very notable senators and representatives, and most of them are basically admitting that they don't really understand crypto. Here we have even Josh Hawley, a U.S. senator, says, "I don't really understand the technology," and they describe him as a tech-forward senator. We have Bernie Sanders. It's not really an issue I know a whole lot about. And then they quote some other lawmakers like the Dragon, who's straight up, basically, she says the same thing every time, basically like, crypto is made by Satan. Crypto blockchains are the spawn of Satan. They must be destroyed, that kind of stuff. And then we've got, the crypto champions in Congress, like Senator Cynthia Lummis, who have good things to say about crypto and really just want to create reasonable, sensible legislation and even do it on a bipartisan basis. You'll remember that she introduced the bill along with U.S. Senator Kirsten Gillibrand of New York, who's on the opposite side of the aisle. I hope it's those reasonable voices who end up carrying the day. But it looks like Congress is basically in disarray, and they have no idea how to regulate crypto still after all this time. And I think it's just going to be more battles of the lobbyists of real crypto trying to get sensible legislation, and the lobbyists of some other forces, some of them even in crypto, but more of the centralized, non-real crypto type parties, some of those who are going to try to push for more nonsensible legislation like the legislation that FTX was pushing. Over on the other side of the Atlantic, the European Central Bank is doing its best job to win the contest as the world's worst crypto fortune teller. Apparently, nobody told them that crypto's death has been reported about 75 times in the past. They said the apparent stabilization of Bitcoin's value is likely to be an artificially induced last gasp before the crypto asset embarks on a road to irrelevance. The ECB blog looks at where crypto stands amid widespread volatility in the crypto markets. It's funny. the more we get these articles, it's been a pretty reliable indicator. The more we get these articles announcing the death of crypto in general, but usually the people who write these articles only really know about Bitcoin, so they just talk about Bitcoin. But the more we see Bitcoin's death, the more exuberantly it's reported, it seems the more we're about to have good times in crypto. That's been the pattern so far, it seems. You could almost sympathize with the prognostications of the ECB social media team when you see headlines like this: Kraken takes steps to weather crypto winter. And by that, they mean we're laying off 30% of our employees, approximately 1,100 people. I'm so sorry, Krakenites. I feel bad for you. Finally, some good news. If you are holding all 7 of the Cardano Summit 2021 NFTs tomorrow, which is today as you watch this, tomorrow for me as I record, today for you as you watch it, today is your day. Virtua says, Landbots, reminder, claim window for holders of all 7 different Summit 2021 NFTs will open tomorrow at 5 p.m. UTC. This post was on November 30th. So tomorrow, December 1st, 5 p.m. UTC. Claim 1 free miner Landbot per set. I'm sure you still have to pay some kind of like little Cardano transaction fee, but it sounds like it's completely free. Aside from that, you can just go to this post on the Virtua timeline. They've got a link for the claim. I hope you're having a great week, and I'll talk to you tomorrow.